The gunshot echoed across the canyon as Piper Tucker dropped to her knees, clutching her daughter close to her chest, praying the outlaws wouldn't return. She had been on the run for 3 days now, ever since her husband's murder at their small homestead near Silver Creek, Arizona Territory, 1878. Little Emma, barely 5 years old, whimpered against her mother's shoulder as Piper dragged them both toward the sparse shade of a twisted juniper tree. "Hush now, sweet girl," Piper whispered, her throat parched and raw. "We'll be fine. Just need to rest a spell." The midday sun beat down mercilessly as Piper settled her back against the rough bark. Their water had run out that morning, and the canteen hung empty at her side. She brushed Emma's dark curls from her feverish forehead, concern growing as she felt the heat radiating from her daughter's small body. "Mama, I don't feel good," Emma murmured, her normally bright eyes glassy with fever. "I know, sweetheart. We'll find water soon." Piper kept her voice steady despite the panic rising in her chest. They were still miles from the nearest town, and the stagecoach route was at least a day's walk across open desert. As the afternoon wore on, Emma's condition worsened. Her cheeks flushed crimson against her otherwise pale skin, and her breathing became labored. Piper tore a strip from her petticoat and pressed it against her daughter's forehead, but without water it offered little relief. Night fell, bringing only a slight respite from the heat. Piper gathered Emma into her lap, humming softly as she rocked back and forth. She hadn't slept in days, but fear and maternal instinct kept her vigilant. The stars emerged, brilliant and cold against the vast emptiness of the desert sky. "Please," Piper whispered to the heavens, "someone help us." As if in answer to her desperate prayer, the distant sound of hoofbeats drifted toward her on the night breeze. Piper froze, her heart racing. Friend or foe? She had no weapon, no means to defend herself or her child. She pulled Emma closer, ready to flee if necessary. The silhouette of a rider appeared against the moonlit landscape. Tall and broad-shouldered, the man guided his horse with confident ease. Piper held her breath as he approached, one hand covering Emma's mouth in case she cried out. The stranger dismounted about 20 yards away, moving slowly as if sensing her fear. "Hello." His voice was deep but gentle. "Anyone out there saw your tracks heading this way?" Piper remained silent, weighing her options. The man took a few steps closer, leading his horse. "I'm not looking for trouble, madam. Just passing through and thought someone might need help." Something in his tone made Piper take a chance. "Over here," she called, her voice barely audible. The man approached cautiously, stopping when he saw Piper and Emma beneath the juniper. "Name's Xavier," he said, removing his hat. "I'm heading to Silver Creek." The moonlight revealed a weathered face with kind eyes and several days' worth of stubble. His clothes were dusty but not ragged, and the silver star pinned to his vest caught the moonlight. "You're a lawman?" Piper asked, relief washing over her. "Deputy Sheriff from Tucson," he confirmed. "And you look like you could use some help." "My daughter," Piper said urgently. "She's burning up with fever. We ran out of water hours ago." Caleb immediately reached for his canteen. "Here," he said, crouching beside them. "Small sips for both of you." The water was warm but tasted like salvation. Piper helped Emma drink first before taking a few precious swallows herself. "What's got you out here alone with a child?" Caleb asked, his eyes scanning the horizon as if anticipating trouble. "My husband, Thomas. He was killed 3 days ago. Men came to our homestead. I grabbed Emma and ran." Piper's voice broke as the reality of her situation crashed over her again. Caleb's expression darkened. "The Blackwell gang," Piper nodded. "They wanted our land, said there was silver on it." She stroked Emma's hair as the child moaned softly in her sleep. "Thomas refused to sell." "I've been tracking them," Caleb said, his jaw tight. "They've been terrorizing homesteaders all through the territory." Emma stirred in Piper's arms, her small body racked with chills despite the lingering heat. "Mama," she whimpered, "my head hurts." Caleb reached out tentatively, placing a calloused hand on Emma's forehead. "She needs a doctor. Town's too far, but I know a place we can take her for the night." "My camp's about a mile from here." Piper hesitated only briefly before nodding. "Thank you. Can you ride?" he asked, already moving toward his horse. "Yes," Piper answered, though in truth, she wasn't certain she had the strength to stay mounted. Caleb lifted Emma from her arms with surprising gentleness. "I'll take her. You just hold on to me." With Emma cradled securely against his chest, Caleb helped Piper onto his horse before mounting behind her. She felt the solid warmth of him at her back as they rode through the darkness, his arms creating a protective circle around both her and Emma. The moon had shifted position in the sky when they finally reached a small clearing beside a creek. A simple camp had been established, a lean-to shelter, a small fire pit, and supplies arranged neatly nearby. "Fresh water," Caleb said, nodding toward the creek. "And I've got some supplies that might help with the fever." He dismounted gracefully despite holding Emma, then helped Piper down. Her legs nearly buckled beneath her, but Caleb steadied her with his free arm. "Easy now," he murmured. "You're safe here." The words broke something inside Piper. After days of terror and grief and desperate flight, hearing anyone tell her she was safe was too much. Tears spilled down her cheeks as she struggled to remain standing. "Let me take care of both of you," Caleb said, guiding her toward the shelter. "You need rest as much as your daughter does." Inside the lean-to, Caleb had arranged a bedroll and some blankets. He laid Emma down gently before helping Piper sit beside her. "I'll fetch water and see what I can do about that fever," he said, ducking out of the shelter. Piper pressed her palm to Emma's cheek, alarmed at how hot it still felt. Her daughter's breathing was shallow, her small chest rising and falling rapidly beneath her dirty dress. Caleb returned with his canteen and a small pouch. "I've got willow bark," he explained, kneeling beside them. "It'll help bring down the fever if we can get her to take it." "How do you know about such things?" Piper asked, watching as he skillfully prepared a tea using water heated over his quickly rekindled fire. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "My mother was a healer of sorts, taught me a thing or two before she passed." While the tea steeped, Caleb soaked a bandana in cool creek water and placed it on Emma's forehead. "We need to get her cooled down," he explained, his hands surprisingly gentle for a man of his size. Together, they managed to coax the bitter tea into Emma, who grimaced but swallowed it down. Afterward, Caleb insisted that Piper drink some as well. "You've been through hell," he said simply. "Need to keep your strength up." As the night deepened, Emma's fever raged on. Piper fought to stay awake, determined to watch over her child, but exhaustion pulled at her with insistent hands. "Sleep," Caleb urged, his voice low in the darkness. "I'll keep watch over both of you." "I can't," Piper protested weakly, "if her fever gets worse." "I'll wake you," he promised. "But you won't be any good to her if you collapse. Rest now, I'll be right outside." The logic of his words and the weight of her exhaustion finally won out. Piper stretched out beside her daughter, one hand resting protectively on Emma's chest to feel each breath. Just before sleep claimed her, she saw Caleb position himself at the entrance to the shelter, his rifle across his knees as he settled in for a long night's vigil. When Piper finally surrendered to sleep, it was deep and dreamless. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to fully relax, trusting in the steady presence of the stranger who had appeared like an answer to her prayers. Throughout the night, Caleb maintained his watch. Every hour he would check on Emma, replacing the cool cloth on her forehead and occasionally coaxing her to take small sips of water when she stirred. The child's fever concerned him deeply, but he'd seen worse in his time. Near dawn, Emma's fever broke. Caleb noticed the change immediately. Her breathing became deeper and more regular, and the flush began to fade from her cheeks. He placed a gentle hand on her forehead and was rewarded with significantly cooler skin. Relief washed over him as he glanced at Piper, still sleeping soundly beside her daughter. In the gray light of early morning, he could better see the woman he'd rescued. Her chestnut hair had come loose from its pins, framing a face that, despite the dirt and exhaustion, was strikingly beautiful. Even in sleep, she maintained a protective position around her child, one arm draped across Emma's small body. Something tightened in Caleb's chest, a feeling he'd long thought himself incapable of experiencing. 3 years as a deputy, preceded by time as a scout for the cavalry, and before that a drifter with few attachments, had hardened him in ways he sometimes regretted. But watching this mother and child stirred emotions he couldn't quite name. When the sun finally crested the eastern horizon, Piper stirred. Her eyes flew open in momentary panic before focusing on Caleb, who sat cross-legged at the entrance to the shelter. "Emma," she began, immediately reaching for her daughter. "Her fever broke about an hour ago," Caleb assured her. "She's sleeping naturally now." Piper's hand confirmed his words as she touched Emma's forehead, now merely warm instead of burning hot. "Thank God," she whispered, tears of relief welling in her eyes. "Thank the willow bark," Caleb said with a small smile, "and her own strength." "She's a fighter, your girl." Piper brushed a curl from Emma's peaceful face. "Like her father," she said softly, grief momentarily shadowing her features. Caleb let a respectful silence fall before speaking again. "I've made some coffee if you'd like some, and there's jerky and hardtack. Not much of a breakfast, but it'll keep you going." "You've done more than enough already," Piper said, carefully extracting herself from beside Emma to join Caleb outside the shelter. "I don't know how to thank you." "No need," he replied, handing her a tin cup of strong coffee. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," Piper said firmly, meeting his eyes directly for the first time. "Not anyone. Most would have ridden past, especially knowing I'm being hunted by the Blackwells." Caleb considered this as he sipped his own coffee. "Where were you heading?" "Silver Creek at first. I have a sister there, but I fear the Blackwells would look for me there." Piper's hands trembled slightly around her cup. "I don't know where's safe anymore. The territorial governor has finally authorized a proper response to the Blackwell gang," Caleb explained. "That's part of why I'm out here. They've gone too far and there's a sizable posse forming to bring them to justice." "Thomas wrote to the governor twice," Piper said bitterly. "Fat lot of good it did us." "I'm sorry," Caleb said and meant it. "The wheels of justice turned slowly out here. Too slowly for too many." They sat in silence for a moment, watching as the sun illuminated the landscape around them. The creek gurgled pleasantly nearby, and birds began their morning songs in the scattered mesquite trees. "What will you do now?" Caleb finally asked. Piper stared into her coffee as if the answer might be found in its depths. "Keep moving, I suppose. Find somewhere the Blackwells won't think to look." "You could come with me to Silver Creek," Caleb suggested. "I'm meeting the posse there and it would be safer than traveling alone. After we deal with the Blackwells, you could decide what's best for you and Emma." Hope and doubt warred on Piper's face. "Would we slow you down?" "I'm in no particular hurry," Caleb answered, "and I'd rest easier knowing you were safe." From inside the shelter came a small voice. "Mama." Piper was on her feet instantly, hurrying back to Emma's side. Caleb followed, hanging back to give them space but close enough to see the child's eyes flutter open. "I'm here, sweetheart," Piper said, gathering Emma into her arms. "How do you feel?" "Thirsty," Emma replied, her voice thin but stronger than the night before. Caleb quickly fetched his canteen and passed it to Piper, who helped Emma take several small sips. "That's the nice man who helped us?" Emma asked, peering up at Caleb with curious eyes. "Yes," Piper smiled. "This is Mr. Xavier. He took care of us last night when you were feeling poorly." Emma studied him solemnly. "Thank you for helping my mama," she said with the direct simplicity of childhood. Caleb knelt down to her eye level. "You're very welcome, Miss Emma. You're a brave young lady." A ghost of a smile touched Emma's lips. "Papa said I was brave too." Pain flashed across Piper's face at the mention of her husband, but she quickly composed herself. "And he was right." "Are you hungry, sweetheart?" Emma nodded, and Caleb immediately went to fetch food. He returned with jerky that he'd cut into small, manageable pieces and a biscuit he'd been saving. "It's not much of a breakfast for a young lady," he apologized, "but we'll find better fare once we reach town." "You're coming with us to town?" Emma asked, perking up slightly. Caleb glanced at Piper, who nodded almost imperceptibly. "If that's all right with you," he said to Emma, "I'd be honored to escort you and your mother to Silver Creek." "Do you have a horse?" Emma asked, becoming more animated as she ate. "Papa had a horse named Samson." "I do," Caleb confirmed. "His name is Rusty, on account of his color. Perhaps you'd like to meet him after you've eaten." Emma's enthusiastic nod prompted a genuine smile from Piper, perhaps her first since Caleb had encountered them. It transformed her face, revealing dimples in her cheeks and a warmth in her eyes that pierced something in Caleb's carefully guarded heart. After breakfast, true to his word, Caleb introduced Emma to Rusty, a sturdy chestnut gelding with a white blaze down his face. The horse seemed to sense the child's fragility, standing perfectly still as Emma stroked his nose with wonder in her eyes. "He's so big," she whispered. "And very gentle," Caleb assured her. "He's carried me through all kinds of weather and terrain without a single complaint." While Emma bonded with Rusty, Caleb began breaking camp. Piper insisted on helping, packing up supplies and dousing the fire with creek water. "Emma seems much better," Caleb observed as they worked. "Thanks to you," Piper said. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't found us." Caleb waved away her gratitude. "The fever might have broken on its own. Or it might not have," Piper countered firmly. "Either way, you saved us both. I won't forget it." By mid-morning, they were ready to depart. Caleb helped Emma onto Rusty's back, then assisted Piper to mount behind her daughter. He would lead the horse on foot, he explained, giving Rusty a rest from carrying double weight. "It's only about 15 miles to Silver Creek," he told Piper. "We should make it by nightfall, even at a gentle pace." They set out as the day began to heat up, Caleb leading Rusty along a trail only he seemed able to discern. Emma, though still weak from her illness, remained alert, asking questions about everything they passed. Caleb answered each one patiently, occasionally sharing bits of knowledge about the desert plants and animals that drew appreciative glances from Piper. Around noon, they stopped in the shade of a rocky overhang to rest and eat. Emma had grown tired again, napping against her mother's shoulder while Piper and Caleb spoke in low voices. "Tell me about Thomas," Caleb said gently. "If you don't mind speaking of him." Piper's gaze grew distant. "We met in St. Louis. I was working as a seamstress, and he came in to have a shirt mended." A fond smile touched her lips. "He was so polite, so different from most men who came into the shop. He courted me properly with my father's approval." "What brought you out west?" Thomas had dreams of building something of his own. When we heard about homesteading opportunities in the territory, he was determined to stake a claim. Piper sighed. "We'd been on our land for 3 years. It was just starting to feel like home." And then the Blackwells came, Caleb finished for her. Piper nodded, tears welling in her eyes. They wanted our water rights. Our creek feeds into the river and Thomas refused to sign them over. Said it wasn't just about us, but about what was right for all the small farmers in the valley. She swallowed hard. They shot him in our own kitchen, right in front of Emma and me. Caleb's hand clenched involuntarily. How did you escape? There's a cellar under our house. I grabbed Emma and ran while they were arguing over what to do with us. We hid until nightfall, then fled on foot. Piper brushed away a tear. I couldn't even bury him properly. Caleb reached out, hesitantly covering her hand with his own. When this is over, I'll help you give him a proper burial. You have my word. Piper turned her hand to grip his tightly. Why are you being so kind to us? You don't even know us. I know enough, Caleb said simply. I know you're brave and devoted to your daughter. I know you've suffered an injustice that needs righting. And I know that in this territory we have to look out for each other if any of us are going to survive. Their eyes held for a long moment before Emma stirred, breaking the connection. Yet something had changed between them, a trust, perhaps, or the beginnings of something neither was ready to name. They continued their journey as the afternoon progressed, with Caleb occasionally spelling Rusty by carrying Emma himself for short stretches. The child perched on his broad shoulders and giggling despite her weakness. Piper watched them, a complicated emotion welling in her chest at the sight of her daughter's small hands resting trustingly on the deputy's hat. By late afternoon, signs of civilization began to appear. Fenced pasture land, occasional distant buildings, and finally the rutted road leading into Silver Creek proper. Caleb helped Piper and Emma dismount before they came into view of the town. It might be best if we're a bit cautious, he explained. The Blackwells have eyes and ears everywhere. My sister's house is on the eastern edge of town, Piper said. Clara Thompson. Her husband runs the hardware store, Caleb nodded. I know of them, good people. We'll approach from behind, avoid the main street. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, they skirted the busier parts of Silver Creek. The town was modest but thriving, with a main street boasting the usual establishments: saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a two-story hotel that was the pride of the community. Caleb guided them through back alleys and side streets until they reached a neat white house with green shutters and a well-tended garden. That's Clara's, Piper confirmed, her pace quickening at the sight of home and family so near. Caleb hung back slightly. I'll see you safely inside, then be on my way. Need to report to the sheriff and meet up with the posse. Something like disappointment flashed across Piper's face, but she nodded. Of course. You've done more than enough already. Before Caleb could respond, the back door of the house flew open, and a woman who bore a striking resemblance to Piper rushed out. Piper. Oh my God. Clara Thompson threw her arms around her sister, tears streaming down her face. We thought when we heard about Thomas. We're all right, Piper assured her, returning the embrace fiercely. Emma was sick, but she's better now, thanks to Mr. Xavier. Clara turned tear-filled eyes to Caleb. You brought my sister and niece safely home. I don't know how to thank you. Just doing my duty, madam, Caleb replied, suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. Clara ushered them all inside, calling for her husband, Paul. The kitchen was warm and fragrant with the smell of fresh bread, and Emma perked up immediately at the prospect of real food and comfortable surroundings. Paul Thompson appeared from another room, his expression shifting from concern to relief at the sight of Piper and Emma. After another round of emotional greetings and explanations, Clara insisted on feeding everyone. The sheriff's been by twice, Paul informed Caleb as they sat at the kitchen table. He's gathered quite a force to go after the Blackwells. They're meeting at dawn tomorrow, Caleb nodded. I'll head over to the office after supper, let him know I've arrived. You'll do no such thing, Clara declared firmly, setting a steaming bowl of stew before him. It's nearly dark and you've been traveling all day. The sheriff can wait until morning. Caleb opened his mouth to protest, but was silenced by the stern look. Clara gave him a look he suspected had cowed many a customer at the hardware store. Besides, Clara continued, we've plenty of room and it's the least we can offer after what you've done for Piper and Emma. Piper, who had been helping Emma with her food, looked up. Please stay, she said softly. Just for tonight. I'd rest easier knowing you were close by. The admission clearly cost her something in pride, and Caleb found he couldn't refuse. Just tonight, then, he agreed. I'll head out at first light. The evening passed comfortably, with Emma falling asleep at the table and being carried to bed by her uncle. Clara insisted on heating water for baths, and Piper emerged from hers looking transformed. Her clean hair hung in damp waves down her back, and the borrowed dress she wore, though slightly too large, reminded Caleb that she was a young woman, not just a desperate mother fleeing for her life. After Caleb had taken his turn bathing and changing into clean clothes lent by Paul, the adults gathered in the small parlor. Paul poured modest glasses of whiskey for himself and Caleb, while the sisters sipped tea. What exactly is the plan for dealing with the Blackwells? Paul asked, his normally mild face hardening at the mention of the gang. The governor has finally authorized a full-scale operation, Caleb explained. Marshals from as far as Prescott are joining in. The Blackwells have gone too far, not just with what happened to Thomas, but with a dozen other families across the territory. It's about time, Paul muttered. They've been terrorizing honest folk for nearly 2 years now. What will happen to us afterward? Piper asked quietly. Our home. I don't know if I could ever go back there. Clara reached for her sister's hand. You'll stay with us, of course, for as long as you need. And the homestead? Paul asked. It's rightfully yours and Emma's now. Piper stared into her tea. I don't know. Perhaps I could sell it eventually. Start fresh somewhere. Caleb watched the play of emotions across her face, understanding the impossible position she was in. The land represented both her husband's dream and the site of his murder. How could anyone reconcile such contradictions? There's no need to decide anything now, he said gently. First, we make sure the Blackwells can't hurt anyone else. Then you'll have time to consider your options. Piper glanced up at him gratefully. Thank you for understanding. Later, as the household prepared for bed, Caleb found himself alone with Piper in the hallway. She had just checked on Emma and was quietly closing the bedroom door when she noticed him. She's sleeping peacefully, Piper said, her voice low. No sign of fever returning. Good, Caleb replied. She's strong like her mother. A flush colored Piper's cheeks at the compliment. I wasn't strong enough to save Thomas. There was nothing you could have done against armed men, Caleb said firmly. You saved Emma. That took tremendous courage. Piper looked up at him, her eyes luminous in the dim light of the hallway. Will you be careful tomorrow? The Blackwells. They're dangerous men. I've faced dangerous men before, Caleb assured her, touched by her concern. Still, Piper insisted, reaching out to touch his arm briefly. I'd hate for Emma to lose another person she's grown attached to. The implication that Emma wasn't the only one who'd grown attached hung unspoken between them. Caleb felt an overwhelming urge to draw Piper into his arms, to promise her that everything would be all right. Instead, he simply nodded. I'll be careful, he promised. Get some rest. You're safe here. Piper held his gaze for a moment longer before turning toward her room. Good night, Caleb. Good night, Piper, he replied, watching until she disappeared behind her door. Morning came all too soon. Caleb rose before dawn, dressing quietly in the guest room Paul had shown him to. He was surprised to find Piper already in the kitchen, brewing coffee. "Couldn't sleep," she explained, pouring him a cup. "Too many thoughts." Caleb accepted the coffee gratefully. "About the future, partly." Piper busied herself with slicing bread. "And about what happens today. These men killed my husband without hesitation. They'll do worse to anyone who stands against them." "That's why we're going prepared," Caleb assured her. "This isn't a posse of hot-headed volunteers. These are experienced lawmen who know what they're doing." Piper turned to face him directly. "Promise me you'll come back, not just for Emma's sake." The directness of her gaze and her words stirred something in Caleb's chest. "I promise," he said quietly. "I'll come back." The moment was interrupted by Paul's entrance. He was already dressed for the day, his normally genial face set in determined lines. "Sheriff's gathering everyone at the livery stable," he informed Caleb. "I'll be joining you if that's all right." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "You're not a lawman, Paul." "Thomas was my friend," Paul replied simply. "And those bastards are threatening the whole valley." Piper looked like she wanted to protest, but held her tongue. It wasn't her place to forbid her brother-in-law from joining the posse, especially when her own husband had died standing up to the same men. Clara appeared next, her face falling when she realized what was happening. "Paul, no, Clara," Paul said firmly, taking his wife's hands. "I have to do this. For Thomas, for all of us." The sisters exchanged glances that spoke volumes. This was the reality of life in the territory. Sometimes men had to stand up against lawlessness, even at great risk to themselves. Breakfast was a subdued affair, with Emma the only one who seemed unaware of the tension. She chattered happily about Rusty and asked Caleb if he would take her riding someday. The innocence of the question tightened Caleb's throat. "I'd like that very much, Emma," he managed to reply. As Caleb and Paul prepared to leave, Piper followed them onto the back porch. Clara remained inside with Emma, distracting the child from the men's departure. "God be with you both," Piper said solemnly, hugging her brother-in-law before turning to Caleb. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, 1,000 unspoken words passing between them. Then, with a suddenness that surprised them both, Piper stepped forward and pressed her lips to Caleb's. The kiss was brief but unmistakably heartfelt. When Piper pulled away, her cheeks were flushed, but her eyes were steady. "That's to remind you of your promise," she said softly. Caleb, momentarily stunned, recovered enough to tip his hat. "I won't forget," he promised, his voice rougher than usual. As they walked away, Paul gave him a sidelong glance but wisely said nothing. The posse gathered at the livery stable was impressive, nearly 20 men, including the sheriff, 2 marshals, and deputies from neighboring counties. The plan was straightforward. The Blackwells had a hideout in the Superstition Mountains, and intelligence suggested most of the gang was currently there, celebrating their recent acquisitions and planning their next moves. "Xavier," Sheriff Dobson greeted Caleb with a firm handshake. "Glad you made it. Heard you brought in the Tucker woman and her girl, found them in the desert," Caleb confirmed. "The child was sick, but she's recovering well." The sheriff nodded approvingly. "Good work. The Tuckers were good people. Damn shame what happened." The posse rode out as the sun crested the eastern horizon, a determined column of men with justice on their minds. Caleb found himself riding beside Marshal Whitley, an older man with a reputation for being tough but fair. "Heard you've been tracking the Blackwells for some time," Whitley remarked. "Off and on for nearly 6 months, Caleb confirmed. "They're slippery, but they've gotten bolder lately, careless." "Happens to all outlaws eventually," Whitley observed. "They start believing they're untouchable. That's usually when they fall." The journey to the Superstition Mountains took most of the day. As they rode, Caleb found his thoughts repeatedly drifting back to Piper, the feel of her lips against his, the weight of her trust, the courage she'd shown in the face of tragedy. He'd known her barely 2 days, yet she'd carved out a place in his thoughts that no woman had occupied before. By late afternoon, they reached the foothills of the mountains. Scout reports confirmed that the Blackwell gang was indeed at their hideout, a former mining claim with several cabins and good defensive positions. "We'll approach from 3 directions," Sheriff Dobson explained as they gathered for final instructions. "Cut off any escape routes. Marshal Whitley will lead the main force from the front, demanding their surrender." "And if they don't surrender?" someone asked. The sheriff's face hardened. "Then we do what needs doing. These men have killed innocent folks and terrorized this territory long enough." The plan was executed with precision as twilight approached. Caleb found himself in Whitley's group, approaching the main cabin where smoke curled from the chimney. The element of surprise worked in their favor. The first sign the Blackwells had of trouble was when Whitley's booming voice demanded their surrender. What followed was chaos. Some of the gang immediately opened fire from the cabins, while others attempted to flee on horseback, only to ride straight into the waiting arms of the flanking groups. Gunfire echoed through the rocky terrain as both sides exchanged shots. Caleb took cover behind a boulder, carefully returning fire only when he had a clear target. He'd been in enough gunfights to know that wild shooting wasted ammunition and endangered allies. Beside him, Paul Thompson showed unexpected steadiness, following Caleb's lead and maintaining his position. The battle seemed to last an eternity, but probably continued for less than 20 minutes. When the shooting finally stopped, 3 lawmen were wounded, but none fatally. The Blackwell gang had fared far worse, 5 dead, including the infamous James Blackwell himself, and the remaining 7 captured, most with injuries of varying severity. "You all right?" Caleb asked Paul as they cautiously emerged from cover. Paul nodded, his face pale but determined. "Never been in anything like that before," he admitted, "but I'm glad I came." As the prisoners were secured and the wounded tended to, Caleb found himself staring at James Blackwell's body. The man had terrorized the territory for years, responsible directly or indirectly for dozens of deaths, including Thomas Tucker. Now he lay in the dirt, looking surprisingly ordinary in death. "It's over," Marshal Whitley said, coming to stand beside Caleb. "The rest will hang after trial." "Not over for the families they hurt," Caleb replied quietly. Whitley clasped his shoulder briefly. "No, but it's justice. That's all we can offer them." The return to Silver Creek was slower than the outward journey, hampered by wounded men and prisoners. Night had fully fallen by the time they reached town, but word of their success had somehow preceded them. The main street was lined with townspeople, lanterns and torches illuminating their faces as they cheered the returning posse. Caleb scanned the crowd, his heart lifting when he spotted Piper standing with Clara in front of the hardware store. Even at a distance, he could see the anxious set of her shoulders relax as she counted the returning men and found both Paul and Caleb among them. The prisoners were secured in the town jail, and the wounded were taken to the doctor's home. Sheriff Dobson addressed the crowd briefly, confirming that the Blackwell threat was ended and thanking all who had participated. As the crowd began to disperse, Caleb made his way to where Piper waited. "You kept your promise," she said simply when he reached her. "I said I would." Caleb removed his hat, suddenly acutely aware of the dust and gunpowder that clung to him. "Is Emma asleep?" "She tried to wait up for you," Piper said, a smile touching her lips, "but she couldn't quite manage it. She made me promise to wake her when you returned, no matter the hour." "Let her sleep," Caleb suggested. "I'll be here in the morning." Piper's eyes searched his. Will you? I thought you might need to return to Tucson now. Eventually, Caleb admitted, but not right away. I've accumulated some time off, and the sheriff there understands my interest in the Blackwell case. I see, Piper said softly. Then perhaps you join us for breakfast tomorrow. Emma would be delighted. I'd like that very much, Caleb replied. Clara, who had been reunited with Paul, called over to them. Caleb, you'll stay with us again tonight, of course. I couldn't impose, Caleb began. Nonsense, Clara interrupted firmly. It's too late to find other accommodations, and you're practically family after all you've done. The word family hung in the air between Caleb and Piper as they walked back to the Thompson home together. Neither spoke of the kiss they'd shared that morning, but it seemed to create a current between them, an awareness that had not existed before. The next few days established a pattern. Caleb participated in the official aftermath of the Blackwell raid, giving statements, helping inventory recovered stolen property, and identifying remains for families seeking closure. But each morning began and each evening ended at the Thompson home, where Emma increasingly attached herself to him, and Piper's presence became a comfort he hadn't known he was seeking. On the fourth day, Caleb received a telegram from Tucson. The sheriff needed him back, a new case requiring his attention. As he walked from the telegraph office to the Thompson home, Caleb found himself uncharacteristically reluctant to share the news. He found Piper alone in the garden behind the house, hanging laundry on the line. She smiled when she saw him approach, her face lighting up in a way that made his heart skip. "There you are," she said. "Emma's been asking when you'd be back. She wants to show you the kitten Paul found for her." "I'd like to see it," Caleb said, then hesitated before continuing. "But I've had word from Tucson. They need me back." Piper's hand stilled on the sheet she was hanging. "When?" she asked, her voice carefully neutral. "I should leave tomorrow," Caleb replied. "Sheriff Jensen has a case that needs attention." "Of course," Piper nodded, resuming her task with deliberate movements. "You have responsibilities. We've kept you too long already." "Piper," Caleb said quietly, moving closer. "These past days have been important to me." She turned to face him, her eyes betraying emotions her composed face tried to hide. "To me as well. Emma adores you, you know." "And her mother?" Caleb asked, taking another step toward her. Piper's cheeks flushed. "Her mother is very grateful for all you've done." "Is gratitude all you feel?" Caleb pressed gently. "You know it isn't," Piper admitted, looking down. "But it's too soon. Thomas has been gone barely 2 weeks, and you have your life in Tucson while I need to rebuild mine here with Emma." Caleb nodded, respecting her honesty even as disappointment settled in his chest. "I understand. Do you?" Piper looked up at him, her eyes suddenly fierce. "Because I don't. I don't understand how I can feel this way about someone I've known such a short time, especially when I'm still mourning my husband. It makes no sense." "The heart rarely does," Caleb said softly. "Mine certainly doesn't. I've spent years avoiding attachments, convincing myself that my work was all that mattered. Then I found you and Emma under that juniper tree, and something changed." Piper's breath caught. "What are you saying, Caleb?" "I'm saying I don't want tomorrow to be goodbye," he replied simply. "I'm saying that my responsibilities in Tucson are real, but so is what I feel for you and Emma." "And what solution do you propose?" Piper asked, her voice barely audible. Caleb took her hands in his. "I don't have one yet. But I'd like your permission to write to you while I'm away, to visit when I can, to see if what started between us might grow into something more given time." Piper's fingers tightened around his. "You do that, even knowing I'm not ready, even knowing it might lead nowhere?" "I would," Caleb confirmed, "if you'll allow it." For a long moment, Piper simply looked at him, searching his face as if memorizing its features. Then, with a small nod, she made her decision. "Write to me," she said softly. "Visit when you can. I can't promise what will come of it, but I'd like to find out." Relief and joy surged through Caleb. He raised Piper's hands to his lips, pressing a gentle kiss to her knuckles. "Thank you." The sound of running footsteps interrupted them as Emma burst into the garden, a tiny orange kitten cradled in her arms. "Mr. Caleb, look what Uncle Paul gave me. Her name is Sunshine." Caleb released Piper's hands and crouched down to admire the kitten, though he remained acutely aware of Piper's gaze on him. "She's beautiful, Emma. You'll take good care of her, I'm sure. Will you help me build her a little house?" Emma asked hopefully. Caleb glanced up at Piper, who gave him a small, encouraging smile. "Not today, sweetheart," he told Emma, "but perhaps next time I visit I have to go away for a while." Emma's face fell. "You're leaving? But you just got here." "I have important work to do," Caleb explained gently. "But I'll come back to visit, I promise." "Pinky promise?" Emma asked solemnly, extending her little finger. Caleb hooked his much larger finger around hers. "Pinky promise." That evening, dinner at the Thompson home was a bittersweet affair. Clara had prepared Caleb's favorite dishes, having quickly discerned his fondness for her apple pie, and Paul shared stories from their youth in Missouri. Emma insisted on sitting next to Caleb, occasionally leaning against his arm as she grew tired. After Emma had been put to bed, the adults gathered in the parlor. Paul poured whiskey for himself and Caleb, while Clara made tea for herself and Piper. "You've become quite important to my sister and niece," Clara observed, her direct gaze reminding Caleb of Piper's own forthrightness. "They've become important to me as well," Caleb replied honestly. "And your intentions?" Paul asked, not unkindly. Caleb took a measured sip of his whiskey before answering. "Honorable but patient. Piper needs time, and I respect that." Clara nodded approvingly. "Good answer." "And your position in Tucson? It's secure," Caleb assured them. "I've been with Sheriff Jensen for 3 years now. He values my work. But it's not a position that would easily transfer to Silver Creek," Paul noted. "Our sheriff already has 2 deputies." "I'm aware," Caleb acknowledged. "There are no easy solutions at present, but difficulties can be overcome when the motivation is strong enough." Piper, who had been quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke. "Caleb and I have agreed to correspond while he's in Tucson. Beyond that, we're making no plans or promises." Clara reached over to squeeze her sister's hand. "That seems wise, though I will say, Piper, that Thomas would want you to be happy." "I know," Piper said softly, "but these things can't be rushed." Later, as the household prepared for sleep, Caleb found himself alone with Piper on the front porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the vast Arizona sky like diamond dust. "I leave at first light," Caleb said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "I'll be up to see you off," Piper promised, "and I'll have Emma ready to say goodbye as well." Caleb nodded, grateful for the consideration. "I've been thinking about what you said earlier about it making no sense to feel this way about someone you've known such a short time." "And?" Piper prompted when he paused. "Perhaps it doesn't need to make sense," Caleb suggested. "Perhaps some connections simply are, without explanation." Piper considered this, her face thoughtful in the moonlight. "My mother used to say that some people are written in our stars. That no matter when or how we meet them, we recognize something in them that calls to us." "Do you believe that?" Caleb asked. "I didn't used to," Piper admitted. "But then, I never expected to find myself alone with a sick child in the desert either. Or to be rescued by a deputy sheriff who would risk his life to avenge my husband's death, and then—" She trailed off. "And then?" Caleb prompted gently. "And then look at me the way you're looking at me now," Piper finished, her voice barely above a whisper. Without conscious thought, Caleb reached out to touch her cheek, his fingers light against her skin. "How am I looking at you? Like I'm something precious," Piper said. "Like you're memorizing my face to take with you tomorrow." "I am," Caleb admitted, "though I doubt I'll need the memory. Your face has a way of appearing before me even when you're not present." Piper's laugh was soft and a little unsteady. "Now you sound like a poet, not a lawman." "Perhaps I contain multitudes," Caleb suggested with a small smile. "Perhaps you do," Piper agreed, leaning slightly into his touch. "Write to me about them." "I will," Caleb promised. Then, because he couldn't help himself, he leaned forward and pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that was both a promise and a farewell. Unlike their first kiss, this one lingered, deepening as Piper's arms slipped around his neck. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. "That wasn't fair," Piper murmured, though there was no reproach in her tone. "No," Caleb agreed, "but I'll be thinking about it all the way to Tucson." Piper's smile was radiant even in the dim light. "Good." The morning came too soon. True to her word, Piper had Emma dressed and ready to say goodbye when Caleb emerged from the guest room with his packed saddlebags. "You really have to go?" Emma asked, her lower lip trembling slightly. Caleb knelt before her. "I do, sweetheart. But I'll write to you and your mama and I'll visit when I can." "Will you bring Rusty when you come back?" Emma asked hopefully. "I certainly will," Caleb promised. "And maybe we'll have that ride I promised you." Emma threw her arms around his neck in a fierce hug that Caleb returned gently, aware of her still recovering strength. "I'll take good care of Sunshine until you come back," she said earnestly. "I know you will," Caleb assured her. "And when I return, you can tell me all about her adventures." After breakfast, the entire household accompanied Caleb to the livery stable where Rusty waited, freshly fed and brushed. Paul helped secure the saddlebags while Clara pressed a package of food for the journey into Caleb's hands. The final goodbyes were subdued but heartfelt. Clara embraced him like a brother, while Paul's handshake conveyed genuine respect and friendship. Emma clung to his leg until Piper gently disengaged her, promising that they would write to Mr. Caleb that very day. When it was Piper's turn, she stepped forward with composed dignity. "Safe travels," she said formally, though her eyes spoke volumes more. "Thank you for everything," Caleb replied, matching her tone while hoping she could read the deeper meaning in his gaze. With a final tip of his hat, Caleb mounted Rusty and turned the horse toward the road that would take him back to Tucson. He allowed himself one glance back at Piper standing tall with Emma's small hand in hers, at the family that had welcomed him so readily, at the life that suddenly seemed possible in a way it never had before. Then he faced forward, knowing that this departure was not an ending but rather the beginning of something new, a journey whose destination remained uncertain but whose first steps had been taken with courage and hope. The weeks that followed Caleb's departure established a new rhythm for Piper and Emma. They settled into life with Clara and Paul, gradually adjusting to their changed circumstances. Emma recovered her strength fully, becoming an energetic presence in the Thompson household, and forming a special bond with her kitten, Sunshine, who followed her everywhere. Piper found purpose in helping at the hardware store, putting her seamstress skills to use by creating curtains and other textile goods to sell alongside Paul's tools and supplies. The work kept her hands busy and her mind occupied, though thoughts of Caleb frequently intruded, especially in the quiet evenings. His first letter arrived 10 days after he'd left, carried by the stagecoach that served as the territory's lifeline to civilization. Piper recognized his handwriting immediately on the envelope and took it to her room to read in private. "Dear Piper, I've arrived safely in Tucson and resumed my duties here." Sheriff Jensen was glad for my return, though not as pleased as certain card players at the Silverton Saloon who claim I've been away too long with their money. Such is the reputation of a lawman we are missed for various reasons, not all of them flattering. My journey back was uneventful, though I found myself in conversations with Rusty that would have surely amused Emma. A man alone on the trail takes his company where he can find it, and Rusty is an excellent listener, if somewhat critical of my singing. Tucson is unchanged, dusty, growing, and full of the usual characters. Yet somehow it feels different, or perhaps I am the one who has changed. I find myself noticing things I might have overlooked before, a mother comforting her child, the way the sunset paints the mountains, little moments that remind me of you and Emma. How is she faring? Has her strength fully returned? And how are you settling into life with your sister and her husband? I find myself wondering about these things at odd moments throughout my day. The case that called me back involves cattle rustling on a large scale, organized and clever, unlike the usual opportunistic theft we see. It will likely keep me occupied for some weeks, but my thoughts still drift to Silver Creek more often than I care to admit. Please give my regards to Clara and Paul, and tell Emma that Rusty asks after her and Sunshine regularly. With warmest regards, Caleb Xavier Piper. Read the letter twice before holding it to her chest, a smile curving her lips. His words painted such a clear picture that she could almost see him riding the trail, talking to his horse, going about his duties in Tucson. More importantly, she could feel his sincerity, the simple, unforced way he expressed his thoughts without flowery declarations or empty promises. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Piper sat at Clara's writing desk and composed her reply. Dear Caleb, your letter brought sunshine to a rainy day here in Silver Creek. We've had unusual weather this past week, thunderstorms rolling through the valley, turning the streets to mud and keeping everyone indoors. Emma watches from the window, fascinated by the lightning, while Sunshine hides under the bed until the thunder passes. Emma is fully recovered now, her energy sometimes overwhelming in the confines of the house. She speaks of you often, and has informed everyone who will listen that her friend Mr. Caleb is a hero who saves people and catches bad men. I hope this doesn't damage your reputation among your fellow deputies. Clara and Paul have been wonderfully supportive. The adjustment has been easier with their help, though I still wake sometimes disoriented, forgetting momentarily all that has happened. Grief is a strange companion, present always, but changing its shape from day to day. I've begun helping at the hardware store, creating household textiles to sell. The work is good for me, providing both purpose and distraction. Emma comes with me most days, charming the customers and occasionally rearranging Paul's careful displays. Silver Creek is slowly returning to normal after the excitement of the Blackwell gang's defeat. Just yesterday, I overheard two old men at the store debating whether James Blackwell had really been as fearsome as rumor suggested, or merely lucky in his criminal endeavors. It seems even villains are reduced to tavern tales in the end. Your cattle rustling case sounds intriguing. I find I'm curious about your daily work, the challenges and satisfactions of upholding the law in a place still finding its way toward civilization. Perhaps in your next letter you might tell me more. Emma has included a drawing for you. She insists it shows Sunshine meeting Rusty, though you may need to use your imagination to discern which blob is which. Her artistic talents are enthusiastic if not yet refined. Be careful in your pursuit of these rustlers. I've discovered I have a vested interest in your continued well-being. Sincerely, Piper. Thus began a correspondence that continued through the summer and into the early fall. Letters traveled back and forth by stagecoach, each one bringing Piper a peculiar blend of joy and longing. Caleb wrote vividly of his work, of Tuckson's characters and challenges, and increasingly of his thoughts about the future. Piper responded with stories of Emma's growth, of her own gradual healing, and cautiously, of her evolving feelings. By September, the letters had become a lifeline for both of them, eagerly anticipated and carefully preserved. Emma insisted on adding her own notes to Piper's letters, her childish scrawl improving with practice as she shared important news about Sunshine's adventures and her own discoveries. It was in early October that Piper received a letter different from the others. The envelope was thicker, and Caleb's handwriting seemed more deliberate than usual. "Dear Piper, I write with news that may change things between us, for better or worse. Sheriff Jensen has offered me a new position, special deputy with jurisdiction throughout the territory, working directly with the marshals on cases that cross county lines. The work would involve more travel but also more autonomy. I've been considering it carefully, weighing the opportunities against the challenges. The position would mean leaving Tucson, having no fixed base of operations. Instead, I would move between assignments as needed, establishing temporary headquarters wherever the work takes me. One such location, as it happens, would be Silver Creek. The town's location makes it a natural hub for operations in the eastern part of the territory. I would need to spend significant time there, weeks, possibly months depending on the cases. I find myself wondering if this opportunity has presented itself by chance or by some design more meaningful. Our correspondence these past months has become increasingly important to me, Piper. The thought of seeing you and Emma regularly, of being part of your lives in a more tangible way than letters allow, influences my thinking about this position more than perhaps it should. Before I give Sheriff Jensen my answer, I wanted to know your thoughts. Would my presence in Silver Creek, even intermittently, be welcome? Or would it complicate the life you're building there? I would understand completely if you feel it's too soon or too uncertain. This letter asks questions I have no right to ask, but I find I cannot make this decision without considering you and Emma. Whatever your response, please know that my regard for you both remains unchanged. Awaiting your reply with hope. Caleb. Piper's hands trembled slightly as she finished reading. The implications of Caleb's letter were clear. He was considering his future with her and Emma in mind, asking indirectly whether they might have a place in each other's lives beyond letters and occasional visits. She sat with the letter for a full day before responding, taking time to examine her own heart and to think practically about what Caleb's presence in Silver Creek might mean. 6 months had passed since Thomas's death, still recent by conventional standards of mourning. Yet Piper found that her grief, while still present, had transformed into something that allowed room for new feelings, new possibilities. Emma would be overjoyed, of course. She spoke of Caleb often, asking when he might visit again. Clara and Paul had made their approval clear enough, regularly inquiring about his letters and subtly encouraging Piper to consider a future that included him. But what did Piper herself want? The question kept her awake that night, staring at the ceiling as memories and hopes tangled together. She remembered the night Emma had fallen ill, how Caleb had sat guard through the darkness, tending to them both with gentle competence. She recalled the way he'd looked at her in Clara's garden, as if she were something precious and unexpected in his life. By morning, Piper had her answer. She wrote quickly, before doubt could interfere. "Dear Caleb, your letter has left me both surprised and touched. That you would consider my feelings and Emma's welfare in making such an important career decision speaks volumes about your character, though I've never doubted it. since that night you found us beneath the juniper tree. To answer your question directly, yes, your presence in Silver Creek would be most welcome. Emma would be delighted, of course. She mentions you in her prayers each night, right after asking blessings for Sunshine and before remembering her Uncle Paul and Aunt Clara, a ranking that amuses Paul to no end. As for me, these months of correspondence have meant more than I can adequately express. Your letters have become touchstones in a time of great change and adjustment. The prospect of seeing you regularly, of building a friendship in person rather than through paper and ink, is one I find myself embracing with unexpected eagerness. Is it too soon after Thomas? Perhaps by some social measures, but I've learned that grief follows no timetable, and healing comes in its own time and way. Thomas would not want Emma and me to deny ourselves connection and friendship out of some sense of obligation to his memory. I cannot predict what the future holds for any of us, Caleb, but I can say with certainty that Silver Creek would be brighter with your presence, however intermittent it might be. Whatever you decide about the position, know that you have friends here who think of you often and fondly. With warmest regards, Piper. She sealed the letter and sent it off the same day, refusing to second-guess her decision. Whatever came next would unfold as it should, but she would not let fear or convention keep her from acknowledging the truth of her feelings. 2 weeks passed with no reply, and Piper began to worry that perhaps she'd been too forward, too encouraging. Had she misinterpreted his letter? Had he changed his mind? Then, on a crisp late October afternoon, as Piper was arranging a display of quilted table runners in the hardware store window, Emma's excited voice rang out from the street. "Mama! Mama! Look who's here!" Piper turned to see her daughter bouncing with excitement on the boardwalk outside. Following Emma's pointing finger, she saw a familiar figure dismounting from a chestnut horse further down the street. Her heart leapt as she recognized Caleb, looking somewhat trail-worn but unmistakable even at a distance. Without thinking, Piper hurried outside, barely registering Clara's knowing smile as she passed. Emma had already raced toward Caleb, who crouched down to receive her enthusiastic hug. Piper approached more slowly, suddenly conscious of her work apron and hastily pinned hair. "You came back," Emma was saying as Piper reached them. "Just like you promised. Did you bring presents? Did Rusty miss me? Have you seen Sunshine yet? She's gotten so big," Caleb laughed, the sound warming Piper from within. "One question at a time, Miss Emma. Yes, I came back. Yes, Rusty missed you terribly. No, I haven't seen Sunshine yet, but I'm looking forward to it. And as for presents..." He produced a small package from his saddlebag. "This might answer your question." Emma accepted the gift with reverent hands, then looked up at her mother for permission to open it. "Go ahead," Piper nodded, her eyes meeting Caleb's over Emma's head. The look that passed between them was filled with unspoken words as Emma unwrapped a beautifully carved wooden horse, small enough to fit in her palm but detailed enough to clearly resemble Rusty. "It's perfect," Emma exclaimed. "Look, Mama, it's Rusty." "I see that," Piper smiled. "What do you say to Mr. Xavier?" "Thank you." Emma threw her arms around Caleb's neck again. "I'm going to show Sunshine right now." Before either adult could respond, she was off, racing back toward the Thompson home with her treasure clutched carefully in her hands. "She still has boundless energy, I see," Caleb observed, straightening to his full height. "And then some," Piper agreed. "It's good to see you, Caleb." "It's good to be seen," he replied, his eyes never leaving hers, "especially by you." A brief silence fell between them, charged with all that remained unsaid. "Your letter," Piper began. "I wasn't sure. I wanted to deliver my response in person," Caleb explained. "Some things shouldn't be trusted to paper and ink," Piper's pulse quickened. "And did you make your decision about the position?" "I did," Caleb nodded. "I accepted. My first assignment brings me to Silver Creek for at least the next month. The territorial governor is concerned about organized rustling operations using the eastern routes." "So you'll be staying in town?" Piper asked, aware of curious glances from passers-by but unable to care. "At the hotel, yes," Caleb confirmed. "Though I hope to spend time with you and Emma if that's still agreeable to you." "Very agreeable," Piper said softly. "Emma will be beside herself with excitement." "And her mother?" Caleb asked, his voice dropping to match hers. Piper felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "Her mother is quite pleased as well." The smile that spread across Caleb's face made him look younger, less careworn. "I'm glad to hear it. I've thought of little else since receiving your letter." Before Piper could respond, Clara appeared from the store, wiping her hands on her apron. "Caleb Xavier. I thought I heard Emma shouting your name. You're just in time for supper, and I won't take no for an answer." Caleb tipped his hat to her. "I wouldn't dream of refusing, Mrs. Thompson. Your cooking has featured prominently in my memories of Silver Creek." "Flattery will get you an extra slice of pie," Clara laughed. "Piper, why don't you show Caleb to the house? I'll close up the store and be along shortly." The look she gave Piper was anything but subtle, but Piper found she didn't mind. Clara had been gently encouraging her to consider a future beyond mourning, insisting that happiness was not a betrayal of Thomas's memory. "I'd be happy to," Piper agreed. "If you'll just bring Rusty this way, we can stable him behind the house." As they walked together, leading the horse, Caleb filled Piper in on his journey and the details of his new position. The easy conversation felt both familiar from their letters and thrillingly new in person. Piper found herself studying his profile, noting the small changes since she'd last seen him: a new scar near his temple, a slight weathering around his eyes that spoke of long days in the sun. "You're staring," Caleb observed without looking at her, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "I'm comparing the man to his letters," Piper admitted. "Making sure they match." "And do they?" Caleb asked, finally turning to meet her gaze. "The letters didn't mention the new scar," Piper noted, reaching up instinctively before catching herself. Caleb took her hand gently, guiding it to the small mark on his temple. "Occupational hazard. A disagreement with a horse thief who objected to being arrested." The casual touch of his fingers on hers sent warmth through Piper's body. "You didn't write about that either." "I didn't want to worry you," Caleb admitted, still holding her hand even after it dropped from his face. "Some aspects of my work aren't suitable for letters to a lady." "I'm not as delicate as you might think," Piper informed him, though she made no move to reclaim her hand. "I've buried a husband and fled across the desert with a sick child. I can hear about a scuffle with a horse thief." Caleb's expression softened. "You're right, of course. I apologize for the omission." They had reached the back of the Thompson house, where a small stable housed Paul's bay gelding. Piper helped Caleb unsaddle Rusty and settle him with fresh hay and water, their hands occasionally brushing in a way that seemed both accidental and inevitable. As they finished, Emma burst from the back door, sunshine at her heels. "Mr. Caleb, come see my room. I put your horse on my special shelf." "Emma, Mr. Xavier has just arrived," Piper gently admonished. "He might want to wash up first." "It's all right," Caleb assured her. "I've been looking forward to seeing this special shelf. Lead the way, Miss Emma." With a delighted grin, Emma grabbed Caleb's hand and pulled him toward the house, chattering about Sunshine's adventures and all the important developments he'd missed. Piper followed, her heart full at the sight of her daughter's hand engulfed in Caleb's much larger one, the way he bent his tall frame to listen attentively to her stories. The evening that followed was one of the happiest Piper had experienced since losing Thomas. Clara outdid herself with supper. Paul brought out a bottle of good whiskey he'd been saving, and Emma was allowed to stay up later than usual, basking in the attention of the adults. Caleb produced small gifts for everyone: a carved wooden hairpin for Clara, a fine leather wallet for Paul, and for Piper, a slim volume of poetry. "I noticed you mentioned Wordsworth in one of your letters," he explained as she ran her fingers over the embossed cover. "Thought you might enjoy having a collection." The thoughtfulness of the gift touched Piper deeply. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'll treasure it." After Emma had finally been persuaded to bed, extracting a promise from Caleb that he would be there in the morning, the adults gathered in the parlor. The conversation flowed easily, touching on town gossip, territorial politics, and Caleb's new position. "So Silver Creek will be seeing more of you," Paul observed, pouring another finger of whiskey into Caleb's glass. "That's the plan," Caleb confirmed. "It makes strategic sense as a base of operations for this region. And I'm sure the strategic advantages are your only consideration," Clara remarked innocently, ignoring Piper's warning glance. Caleb met her gaze directly. "Not the only consideration, no. But I wouldn't have accepted the position if it didn't make professional sense as well." "Quite right," Paul nodded approvingly. "A man's work has to come first." "Not first," Caleb corrected gently, "but it can't be disregarded either. I've seen too many families suffer when a man can't provide properly." The conversation shifted to the practical considerations of Caleb's new role: the dangers, the irregular hours, the travel required. Through it all, Piper found herself weighing these realities against the undeniable pull she felt toward him. A lawman's life was uncertain, often dangerous. Was she prepared to risk her heart again, knowing the possibilities for loss? As if sensing her thoughts, Caleb's eyes found hers across the parlor. The steady warmth in his gaze seemed to answer her unspoken questions, offering reassurance without empty promises. Later, as the evening wound down, Piper walked Caleb to the front door. Clara and Paul had tactfully retired early, leaving them a moment of privacy. "Thank you for coming to supper," Piper said, suddenly shy in a way their letters had never made her feel. Emma was thrilled. "Just Emma?" Caleb asked, his voice teasing but his eyes serious. Piper smiled. "Not just Emma. I've missed our conversations, even though the letters have been wonderful." "Letters have their limitations," Caleb agreed. "They can't capture everything." "No," Piper said softly, "they can't." Caleb reached out slowly, giving her time to step away if she wished, and tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear. "I'd like to call on you properly while I'm stationed here, with your permission, of course." The formal request made Piper's heart flutter unexpectedly. "I'd like that very much." "Good," Caleb said simply. Then, as if unable to help himself, he leaned forward and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "Good night, Piper. I'll see you tomorrow." "Good night, Caleb," she replied, watching as he stepped out into the cool October night, his tall figure silhouetted against the starry sky. As Piper closed the door, she pressed a hand to her forehead where his lips had touched, marveling at how such a simple gesture could feel so significant. 6 months ago, she had been a desperate mother fleeing for her life with a sick child. Now she was standing in her sister's hallway, contemplating a future that suddenly held possibilities she had thought forever lost to her. The days that followed established a new pattern. Caleb's work kept him busy during daylight hours, investigating rustling operations and coordinating with local ranchers. But evenings found him at the Thompson home more often than not, sharing supper and afterward engaging Piper in conversations that ranged from territorial politics to favorite childhood memories. Emma quickly adapted to Caleb's presence, seeking him out whenever he appeared and including him in her games and stories. To Piper's quiet delight, Caleb showed unlimited patience with her daughter, never too busy or too tired to listen to her chatter about Sunshine's latest adventures, or to help her build elaborate structures with the wooden blocks Paul had made for her. On Sundays, Caleb escorted Piper and Emma to church, presenting a picture of respectability that did not go unnoticed by Silver Creek's residents. Town gossip, initially centered on Piper's tragic circumstances, gradually shifted to speculation about the handsome deputy who seemed so attentive to the young widow and her daughter. Clara, ever protective of her sister, deflected the more intrusive questions with practiced skill. "Piper and Deputy Xavier are friends," she would say firmly. "He's been kind to her and Emma during a difficult time, nothing improper about that." But privately, Clara encouraged the relationship. "He looks at you the way Paul still looks at me after 12 years, she told Piper one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. "That's not something to dismiss lightly." "It hasn't even been a year since Thomas died," Piper reminded her, though with less conviction than she might have mustered weeks earlier. "Time is measured differently out here," Clara replied pragmatically. "Life is shorter, harder. People understand that happiness should be grasped when it presents itself." By November, Caleb had extended his stay in Silver Creek twice, citing ongoing investigations that required his presence. Few believed this was his only motivation, but his work was thorough and effective, earning the respect of local ranchers and townspeople alike. One crisp afternoon, as Piper was closing up the hardware store, Caleb appeared with Rusty saddled and a smaller, gentle mare on a lead rein. "I thought you and Emma might enjoy a ride," he suggested. "The weather's perfect, and I know a place not far from town where the view is quite something." Piper hesitated only briefly before agreeing. Emma, summoned from where she'd been playing with the shopkeeper's son next door, was beside herself with excitement at the prospect of finally riding Rusty, as Caleb had promised months ago. The three set out from town with Emma perched happily in front of Caleb on Rusty's saddle, while Piper rode the mare alongside them. They followed a winding trail through juniper-dotted hills until they reached a small mesa overlooking the valley. Silver Creek was visible in the distance, smoke rising from chimneys against the backdrop of mountains turned purple in the late afternoon light. "It's beautiful," Piper breathed, dismounting with Caleb's assistance. "I found it by accident," Caleb explained, helping Emma down before spreading a blanket on a flat rock. "Got turned around tracking some rustlers and ended up here just as the sun was setting." He produced a small bundle from his saddlebag: fresh bread, cheese, and apples, along with a canteen of cool water. The impromptu picnic delighted Emma, who declared it the best adventure ever as she munched happily on her apple. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Emma wandered a short distance away, fascinated by a colony of ants building a mound near the edge of the mesa. "Stay where I can see you," Piper called after her. "I will, Mama," Emma promised, already crouched in absorbed observation of the busy insects. Left relatively alone, Piper and Caleb sat side by side on the blanket, the silence between them comfortable yet charged with unspoken thoughts. "I received a telegram yesterday," Caleb finally said, his eyes on the distant mountains. "The territorial marshal is pleased with the progress we've made on the rustling cases. Most of the operation has been dismantled." "That's good news," Piper said, though she sensed more was coming. "It is," Caleb agreed, "but it also means my official reason for remaining in Silver Creek is diminishing." A small knot formed in Piper's stomach. I see. Do you? Caleb turned to face her directly. Because I'm not sure I do. These past weeks have been significant for me, Piper. Being here, spending time with you and Emma, it's made me question things I've always taken for granted. What things? Piper asked softly. My life. My choices. Caleb ran a hand through his hair, a rare gesture of uncertainty from a man usually so composed. I've been a drifter in many ways, even with the badge, moving from one assignment to the next, never putting down roots. And now I find myself thinking about what it might mean to have a home, a real one, not just wherever I happen to lay my bedroll. His eyes held her steadily. I find myself thinking about you and Emma and how quickly you've become important to me. Piper's heart beat faster. Caleb, I'm not proposing, he clarified quickly. Not yet. It's too soon and there's still much we don't know about each other. But I wanted you to know that when I leave Silver Creek this time, it won't be goodbye. Not unless you want it to be. Piper reached for his hand, entwining her fingers with his. I don't want it to be goodbye. The simple admission hung between them, weighty with promise. Caleb raised their joined hands and pressed a kiss to her knuckles, his eyes never leaving hers. Then it won't be, he promised. From across the mesa came Emma's excited voice. Mama, Mr. Caleb, look at the sunset. It's turning everything pink. The moment broke as they both turned to watch Emma, silhouetted against the blazing sky, her arms outstretched as if to embrace the beauty around her. She's something special, Caleb observed, his voice warm with affection. She is, Piper agreed, and she's grown very attached to you. The feeling is mutual, Caleb assured her. She reminds me that there's wonder in the world, even after all the darkness I've seen. They called Emma back as the light began to fade, packing up their small picnic and mounting the horses for the return journey. As they rode back toward Silver Creek, Emma nodding off against Caleb's chest while he kept one protective arm around her, Piper felt a certainty settle in her heart. Whatever came next, whatever challenges they might face, she was ready to explore this unexpected path that had opened before her. With Caleb, with Emma, building something new from the ashes of what had been lost. The weeks that followed brought changes both subtle and profound. Caleb's official duties in Silver Creek concluded, but he arranged to make the town his regular base between assignments, renting a small house not far from the Thompsons. The arrangement raised eyebrows among some of the more traditional townspeople, but most accepted it as the natural progression of things. Emma took to visiting Caleb's house with increasing frequency, always with Piper's permission, and often with her accompaniment. The three established rituals that began to feel like family traditions: Sunday dinners after church, evening stories by the fire, occasional rides into the countryside when weather permitted. As Christmas approached, Piper found herself reflecting on the year that had passed, a year that had brought devastating loss, but also unexpected joy. Thomas remained in her heart, a presence she honored in quiet moments and in the stories she shared with Emma about her father. But alongside that grief had grown something new and hopeful, something she was increasingly certain Thomas would have approved of. On Christmas Eve, with snow falling gently outside, the extended family gathered at the Thompson home. Clara and Paul had outdone themselves with decorations and food, determined to make the holiday special despite, or perhaps because of all they had endured that year. Emma was beside herself with excitement, especially when Caleb arrived with a mysterious large bundle that he refused to let her peek at before morning. After a festive supper, they gathered in the parlor to sing carols, Emma's clear voice rising above the others as she perched on Caleb's knee. When she finally succumbed to exhaustion, Piper carried her to bed, returning to find Caleb helping Paul stoke the fire while Clara arranged presents beneath the small pine tree they'd decorated. "She finally asleep?" Caleb asked, making room for Piper beside him on the settee. "Out like a light," Piper confirmed. "Though she made me promise 3 times that you'd be here in the morning to see her open her gifts." "Wild horses couldn't keep me away," Caleb assured her, his arms settling comfortably around her shoulders. Clara and Paul exchanged knowing glances before Clara announced that they were retiring for the night. "Don't stay up too late, you two," she advised with a meaningful look at the mistletoe she'd strategically hung earlier. Left alone, Piper and Caleb sat in companionable silence, watching the fire and listening to the soft tick of the mantel clock. Outside, the snow continued to fall, muffling the usual night sounds of the town. "I have something for you," Caleb said eventually, reaching into his pocket. "I didn't want to give it to you with everyone watching." He produced a small box wrapped in silver paper, placing it carefully in Piper's hands. She looked at him questioningly before untying the ribbon and removing the paper to reveal a velvet jeweler's box. Inside, nestled on a bed of satin, was a silver locket, simple but beautifully crafted. When Piper opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Emma on one side while the other remained empty. "I thought perhaps," Caleb said hesitantly, "that someday there might be another picture to add." "If you wanted." Tears welled in Piper's eyes as she understood his meaning. "It's perfect," she whispered. "Will you help me put it on?" Caleb took the locket and carefully fastened it around her neck, his fingers brushing against her skin in a way that sent shivers down her spine. When he finished, his hands remained at the nape of her neck, drawing her gently toward him. "Piper," he said softly, "I know it hasn't been very long and I promise not to rush you, but I find myself thinking more and more about our future if you'll have me." Piper's heart raced as she met his gaze. "What are you saying, Caleb?" "I'm saying that I've fallen in love with you," he replied simply. "With your strength, your kindness, your devotion to Emma. I'm saying that I want to build a life with you both if you'll give me that chance." The words she had been waiting for, perhaps since that night beneath the juniper tree, filled Piper with a joy so profound it almost hurt. "I love you too," she whispered. "I think I have for some time now." Caleb's smile was radiant as he leaned forward, closing the distance between them. His lips met hers in a kiss that began gently but quickly deepened, expressing all the longing and hope that had built between them over the months. When they finally parted, both breathless, Caleb rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not proposing tonight," he clarified. "When I do, it will be proper with a ring and perhaps when Emma is awake to give her approval." Piper laughed softly. "Her approval is a foregone conclusion. She already calls you our Caleb when she talks to Sunshine." "Does she now?" Caleb's expression was pleased. "Well, I'd still like to do things right. For all 3 of us." "I'd expect nothing less," Piper assured him, nestling into the circle of his arms. They sat together before the fire until the embers burned low, talking of the future, of possibilities that had seemed unimaginable a year ago. When Caleb finally rose to leave, promising to return early for Christmas morning, Piper walked him to the door. "Merry Christmas, Caleb," she said, rising on tiptoe to kiss him once more. "Merry Christmas, Piper," he replied, his eyes warm with promise. "The first of many, I hope." As she watched him walk through the gently falling snow toward his rented house, Piper touched the locket at her throat, feeling a sense of rightness settle deep in her soul. Life had taken unexpected turns, bringing both sorrow and joy. But tonight, on this silent, holy night, joy had the upper hand. Morning dawned clear and bright, the world transformed by a blanket of pristine snow. Emma woke with the sun, bursting into Piper's room with the exuberance only a child on Christmas morning can muster. "Is Caleb here yet?" she demanded, bouncing on the bed. "Did Santa come? Can we open presents?" Piper laughed, catching her daughter in a hug. "Not yet, yes, and after breakfast," she answered in order. "Let's get dressed and help Aunt Clara with the cooking. I'm sure Caleb will be here soon." True to his word, Caleb arrived as they were setting the breakfast table, stamping snow from his boots and carrying the mysterious bundle that had intrigued Emma the night before. His eyes met Piper's across the room, a private smile passing between them that made Clara raise an eyebrow knowingly. Breakfast was a hurried affair, with Emma too excited to eat much and the adults indulging her impatience. Finally, they gathered in the parlor, where presents were distributed and opened amid exclamations of delight and gratitude. Emma received new books, a handsome doll from Clara and Paul, and various small treasures that delighted her. But it was Caleb's gift that left her speechless, a beautifully crafted rocking horse, painted to resemble Rusty right down to the white blaze on his face. "Did you make this?" Piper asked in amazement as Emma clambered onto the horse and began rocking with abandon. Caleb nodded, a hint of shyness in his expression. "Been working on it for weeks, whenever I had spare time. Had to keep it at the livery to keep it a surprise." "It's wonderful," Piper said softly, squeezing his hand. "She'll treasure it always." The day passed in a blur of happiness, a special Christmas dinner, visits from neighbors, and later, a walk through town to admire the snow and exchange holiday greetings with fellow citizens of Silver Creek. Everywhere they went, Piper noticed how naturally they moved as a unit, with Caleb lifting Emma over snowdrifts and offering Piper his arm on slippery patches. They looked, she realized, like a family. The thought no longer frightened her as it once might have. Instead, it filled her with quiet certainty. New Year's Day brought another snowfall and a decision from Caleb. As they sat together in the Thompsons' parlor, watching Emma play with her rocking horse, he shared his plans. "I've been offered a permanent position here in Silver Creek," he announced. "Sheriff Dobson is getting on in years and wants to groom a successor. He's asked me to become his chief deputy, with the understanding that I'd take over when he retires." "That's wonderful news," Piper said warmly. "You'd make an excellent sheriff." "It would mean staying here permanently," Caleb continued, his eyes searching hers. "Putting down those roots we've talked about." "I think that sounds perfect," Piper replied, understanding the deeper question he was asking. Caleb's smile was all the confirmation she needed that they were of one mind about what the future might hold. Winter gave way to spring, bringing new growth to the valley and new developments to their lives. Caleb formally began his duties as chief deputy, working closely with Sheriff Dobson and earning the respect of the townspeople. Piper expanded her textile business at the hardware store, her fine work attracting customers from neighboring communities. Emma thrived, growing taller and more articulate with each passing week. She transferred her affections seamlessly between her two homes, the Thompsons' house and Caleb's small rental, where she had her own special corner filled with toys and books. By April, exactly 1 year after Thomas's death, Piper found herself standing at his grave in the Silver Creek Cemetery. She'd brought fresh wildflowers, arranging them carefully at the base of the simple headstone. "Hello, Thomas," she said softly. "It's been a year now. Emma misses you. She talks about you often, especially when she sees something that reminds her of the stories you used to tell her." A gentle breeze stirred the new leaves on the cottonwood trees that shaded the cemetery. "I wanted you to know," Piper continued, "that we're doing well. Emma is growing so fast you'd be proud of her. She's learning to read already and asks questions about everything under the sun." She paused, gathering her thoughts. and I've met someone. His name is Xavier. He found us after we fled the homestead. Emma was sick with fever, and he took care of us both. He helped bring the Blackwells to justice. Piper touched her wedding band, which she still wore on her right hand. He's a good man, Thomas, kind and honorable like you. He loves Emma and she adores him. And he loves me too. We're building something together, something I never thought I'd have again after losing you. Tears welled in her eyes, but they were different from the tears she'd shed in the early days of her grief, gentler somehow, touched with gratitude alongside the sorrow. I'll always love you, she whispered. You were my first love, Emma's father. Nothing will ever change that. But I hope you'd be happy for us, that you'd want us to find joy again. As she finished speaking, Piper became aware of a presence behind her. Turning, she found Caleb standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. I didn't mean to intrude, he said quietly. You're not, Piper assured him, wiping away her tears. I was just talking to Thomas, telling him about us. Caleb nodded, understanding in his eyes. Would you like me to give you more time? No, Piper said, extending her hand to him. I've said what I needed to say. Caleb joined her at the graveside, his arm slipping naturally around her waist. Together they stood in silence for a moment, honoring the man whose absence had, in its way, brought them together. Where's Emma? Piper asked as they finally turned to leave. With Clara, Caleb replied. I told her I needed to speak with you privately. Something in his tone made Piper look up sharply. Is everything all right? Everything is perfect, Caleb assured her, taking her hand as they walked through the cemetery gates. I just wanted this moment to be just for us. He led her to a nearby stand of trees where Rusty was tethered, along with the mare Piper had come to think of as her own. A blanket was spread on the ground with a small basket beside it. What's this? Piper asked, though her heart had begun to race with anticipation. I thought we might have a picnic, Caleb suggested, helping her sit on the blanket. It's a beautiful day. Indeed it was. The April sunshine warmed the air, wildflowers dotted the grass around them, and birds sang in the trees overhead. Caleb unpacked the basket, revealing bread, cheese, and early spring berries, along with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. They ate in companionable silence for a while, enjoying the simple fare and each other's company. When they had finished, Caleb refilled their glasses and seemed to gather himself. Piper, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion she could see in his eyes. This past year has been a journey neither of us could have anticipated. When I found you and Emma that night, I had no idea how completely you would change my life. Piper felt tears threaten again but held them back, wanting to hear every word. I've come to love you both so deeply that I can't imagine a future without you in it, Caleb continued. You've shown me what home truly means, not a place, but the people you choose to build your life around. Reaching into his pocket, Caleb withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a ring, a simple gold band with a modest diamond that caught the sunlight. I know it hasn't been very long and I would understand if you wanted to wait, he said earnestly. But I love you, Piper Tucker. I love your strength, your kindness, your devotion to Emma. I love the way you see the world and the way you've helped me see it too. I want to build a life with you both, to be a husband to you and a father to Emma if she'll have me. He took a deep breath. Will you marry me? The tears Piper had been holding back spilled over as joy welled up inside her. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Caleb, I'll marry you. His face lit with a smile so radiant it took her breath away. With slightly trembling hands, he slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for a kiss that promised a lifetime of love and companionship. When they finally parted, Piper rested her forehead against his. Emma will be overjoyed, she murmured. I hope so, Caleb said. I've already asked for her blessing, actually. Piper pulled back, surprised. You did? When? Last week, Caleb admitted with a smile. I wanted to do things properly. She was very solemn about it, made me promise to always keep both of you safe and to read her stories every night, even when she's as old as Aunt Clara. Laughter bubbled up from Piper's chest. That sounds like Emma. And what did she say? She said yes, of course, but only if she could be the one to throw flowers at the wedding. Caleb's eyes twinkled. I told her that was entirely appropriate for such an important young lady. Piper's heart swelled with love for this man who had so thoughtfully included her daughter in this momentous decision. Thank you for that, she said softly. It means the world to me that you consider her feelings so carefully. She's part of the package, Caleb said simply. The best part, some might argue. And yet you still want to marry her mother, Piper teased. More than anything, Caleb assured her, drawing her close again. They lingered beneath the trees until the shadows lengthened, speaking of their plans and dreams for the future. By the time they mounted their horses to return to town, the setting sun had painted the sky in shades of pink and gold reminiscent of that first evening on the mesa. Emma's reaction to the news was exactly as predicted: unadulterated joy, followed by 1,000 questions about the wedding, her dress, and whether Sunshine could participate in the ceremony. Clara wept happy tears while Paul clapped Caleb firmly on the back, declaring it about time. The wedding was set for June, when the valley would be in full bloom and the weather most favorable. Plans unfolded with the enthusiastic participation of the entire community. Sheriff Dobson insisted on hosting the reception in the town square, while Clara took charge of the wedding feast. The ladies of the church sewing circle collaborated on a quilt for the newlyweds, and Paul began construction on a larger home on the edge of town, his wedding gift to the new family. Through it all, Piper found herself reflecting on the strange, winding path that had brought her to this happiness. The devastating loss of Thomas had seemed like the end of everything, yet it had ultimately led her to a new beginning, to a love she had never anticipated finding. On the morning of her wedding, as Clara helped her dress in a gown of ivory silk, simple but elegant, sewn by Piper herself, she felt Thomas's presence one last time, a gentle blessing that brought tears to her eyes. He'd be happy for you, Clara said softly, somehow knowing her sister's thoughts. You deserve this joy, Piper. I know, Piper replied, touching the locket Caleb had given her at Christmas. Inside now were 2 photographs, Emma on one side and Thomas on the other, a remembrance of the past she carried into her future. The ceremony itself was everything Piper could have wished for. Emma preceded her down the aisle of the small church, scattering flower petals with serious concentration. Caleb waited at the altar, his face transforming with wonder as Piper appeared on Paul's arm. Their vows were simple but heartfelt, promises of love and fidelity exchanged before the community that had embraced them both. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Caleb's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, drawing appreciative murmurs and a few good-natured whoops from the congregation. The celebration afterward spilled from the church into the town square, where tables had been set up beneath strings of lanterns. Music, food, and laughter flowed freely as the town celebrated not just a wedding but the triumph of hope over tragedy, of love over loss. As twilight descended, Caleb found Piper at the edge of the festivities, watching Emma dance with Paul, her flower girl dress slightly rumpled but her face alight with happiness. "Happy, Mrs. Xavier?" Caleb asked, slipping his arm around his new wife's waist. "Completely," Piper assured him, leaning into his embrace, "though it may take some time to get used to the new name." "We have plenty of time," Caleb promised. "A lifetime." As they stood together watching the celebration, Piper's mind traveled back to that desperate night a little over a year ago, her child burning with fever, her own body weak with exhaustion and grief, the unknown stretching before her like a vast desert. How impossible it would have seemed then to imagine this moment of perfect happiness. "What are you thinking?" Caleb asked, noticing her contemplative expression. "I'm thinking about that night you found us," Piper admitted. "How close we came to never knowing each other." Caleb's arms tightened around her. "But I did find you, and I believe I was meant to." "Do you?" Piper asked, turning to look up at him. "I do," Caleb said firmly. "Call it fate or providence or just good fortune, whatever brought me to that juniper tree that night changed everything for me. For us." Piper raised her face to his, accepting his kiss as the music swelled around them and lantern light bathed the square in a golden glow. Yes, she thought, everything had changed. What had begun in desperation, a mother's fear for her child, a stranger's act of kindness, had blossomed into something beautiful and enduring. As Emma ran to join them, throwing her arms around both their waists, Piper felt the circle of their family complete itself. The past would always be part of her, honored and remembered. But the future, this future, with Caleb and Emma stretched before them bright with promise, a new chapter in a story still being written. And it had all begun with a fever, a child and a cowboy who had kept watch through the night, guarding them both until dawn broke on a new day and a new beginning.